not going to let these crazy social issues regarding abortion and all this other right-wing craziness get in the way of funding our students.
This week in Pennsylvania, the state house moves to fund some of the state's most prominent universities. Will the Senate finish the job? A state court throws out former Governor Wolf's push to tax energy companies that pollute in PA. And we're getting you set for Tuesday's election. We'll meet the candidates in some of the state's biggest races. Well, hello and welcome to This Week in Pennsylvania. I'm Dennis Owens. We are covering hot topics in PA policy as well as politics, as well as the issues that are important to you and your family. Well, the election is Tuesday. We're going to do a deep dive on that a bit later. And we're going to break down a huge ruling by Commonwealth Court this week. The headline of that, it tossed out former Governor Wolf's signature climate initiative called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It would levy a carbon tax on polluters in an attempt to bring down emissions. The court ruled that's a tax. Governors can't unilaterally levy taxes. That's the job of the legislature. Again, much more on that ruling. We've got our analyst going to break it down too a little bit later in the show. The PA House moved to fund state-related universities like Penn State, Pitt, and Temple, which is typically done with the budget in late June, but there are strings attached to what they passed. The bill provides a 7% increase for Penn State, Pitt, and Temple, a 25% increase for Lincoln University. But the funding requires a tuition freeze for the next school year. Another bill passed in the House this week would subject those universities to the state's right to know law, which many Republican legislators have been pushing for. The bills moved to the Republican-controlled Senate, where their fate is unclear. House Democratic leader Matt Bradford was at the PA Press Club this week. He admitted the first 9 months of this session have not been smooth. He blamed himself and other legislative leaders for, quote, talking past each other. And he said this about school vouchers, which Senate Republicans and the Democratic governor agreed to, but he has refused to allow.
Vouchers are very problematic, period, full stop. I don't believe in using government taxpayer money to fund religious schools, schools that can discriminate, schools that frankly don't have to take the hardest cases.
As for the still not completely done state budget, Bradford said it probably wasn't a good idea to send over 95% of the money in a general appropriations bill without having a completely done deal. The State House also took aim this week at hate crimes. It passed 3 bills. One would expand protections to victims targeted because of gender identity, sexual orientation, age, or disability. Another would provide training for law enforcement to identify and investigate hate crimes. And the third would require colleges to have an online and anonymous reporting option, needed now more than ever, supporters argue.
We need to provide our communities with the tools to protect those vulnerable populations, particularly in a time of heightened insecurity.
The anti-hate bills passed the full House. They're on to the Republican-controlled Senate, and again, their future uncertain. Governor signed into law a bill to further study maternal morbidity and requires the state health department to publish data, including demographic information. Black women are 2 to 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. Lawmakers say the data will be used to determine next steps. The topic of religion in public schools can be controversial, but not one proposal that passed the House this week, making Pennsylvania the 50th and final state to allow teachers to wear items reflecting their religion, like a cross, yarmulke, or headscarf. By a vote of 201 to 1, the House voted to overturn the old ban on teachers wearing religious garb. Senate already passed it, so it's headed to the governor for his signature. Well, should Pennsylvania join several neighboring states and legalize recreational or adult use marijuana? That topic had a hearing in the House this week. Supporters say legalizing and taxing also means controlling it. The quality of the product can be tested. Sellers are licensed and inspected. Only adults could purchase. And the state would make lots of green. Opponents aren't convinced and don't care that residents are enriching PA's neighbors by crossing state lines to buy weed.
We do not need to be the dumping ground of other states that have excess capacity.
If we allow that to happen, to seep into our communities, the results are going to be disastrous, and they already have been.
Now, this was mostly an informational public hearing. I'm told the issue likely doesn't move forward until next year at the earliest. Well, it is election week in PA. Tuesday is the in-person voting day, and there's lots of noteworthy races. Philadelphia will elect its 100th mayor. The first in the 1600s was actually selected by William Penn. If Sherelle Parker wins, as expected, she'd be the first woman in charge of the city of brotherly love. She's facing Republican David O. If he wins, he'd be Philly's first Republican mayor since the 1950s. On the western side of the state, Allegheny will elect its county executive. This could be a close one, as former state rep Sarah Innamorato is a proud progressive. Former bank executive Joe Rockey is the Republican, but running as a centrist, clearly trying to peel off some of those Reagan Democrats. Interesting to see if they still exist. And there are two open seats on the Superior Court. The Democrats are Jill Beck and Tamika Lane. The Republicans are Maria Batista and Harry Smale. There's also an open seat on Commonwealth Court. Most Pennsylvanians can't tell you what that does, but it might impact their lives more than any other court. We sat down with the candidates who would like to be that court's next judge.
It's a very special court. There's no other court in the country like it.
PA's Commonwealth Court is unique to PA. Here's cases involving state and local governments. Recently decided public school funding is unconstitutionally inequitable, and that the state's entry into a greenhouse gas initiative was also unconstitutional. They are huge cases.
Dennis, I have one-of-a-kind experience for our one-of-a-kind Commonwealth Court.
Republican Megan Martin from Cumberland County clerked for a Lancaster County judge, was an attorney in the Tom Ridge and Tom Corbett administrations, a civilian lawyer for the Navy, and is the only woman to serve as secretary parliamentarian in the PA Senate. Experiences in all three branches of government that she calls a plus.
I know who writes our laws. It's not the judges. And I think knowing the legislative process most certainly will give me incredible insight that I can bring to the Commonwealth Court. There are very few people who understand what I understand about our state government.
I would like to be on the court so that I can stand up for people's civil rights.
Philadelphia Democrat Matt Wolf was a private practice civil rights attorney, served 2 tours with the Army in Iraq and Afghanistan, earning a Bronze Star, and spent the last 6 years as a judge in Philly. He's on the ballot for that seat and Commonwealth Court Tuesday, and says if the race is about qualifications, he wins.
After 25 years of litigation experience, I'm a trial attorney, I'm a judge, and my opponent is neither a trial attorney nor does she have judicial experience.
Though unlikely anytime soon, if an abortion case were brought, Commonwealth Court is likely the first stop. Both say they'd follow the law, but added this.
And I think that reproductive freedom is one of the civil rights that's important under the United States Constitution and the Pennsylvania Constitution.
I'm going to apply the law as our General Assembly wrote it. I'm not going to legislate from the bench. I know my swim lane. I'm going to stay in my swim lane.
Both have the same recommended rating by the PA Bar. Closing arguments?
Judges have tremendous influence over whether the government can take advantage of people, both in terms of criminal law, how far are the police allowed to go, and in terms of the state of Pennsylvania creeping into people's homes and taking away rights. My job as a judge on the Commonwealth Court is to keep the government in check.
I'm going to be a judge who's not afraid to hold our government accountable, because just as you and I and all the good people of this great Commonwealth have to follow the law, so too does our government.
And there are currently 8 judges on Commonwealth Court, 5 Republican, 3 Democrat, 7 women, 1 man. Up next, we focus on the Supreme Court race. You've no doubt seen the attack ads. They're probably running during this show. But we'll introduce you to the candidates and get their take on the especially nasty campaign. Election day is Tuesday. A seat is open on the state's high court, but the campaign to win it has gone lower than low, many calling it the worst personal attacks they've ever seen in a judge race. We sat down with the 2 people who want to put on that black robe, who conceded they're both getting black eyes.
Lady Justice has her scales of justice for a reason.
Carolyn Carluccio is Montgomery County's president judge with a rare resume that includes being both a federal prosecutor and chief public defender. She says that gives her balance. And the Republican says she'd give the high court, which is currently 4-2 Democrat, a bit more balance too.
There's a saying that we don't wear red robes, we don't wear blue robes, we wear black robes. And our personal and political opinions and beliefs have no place on the bench.
Critics say she's pro-life and if given the opportunity would roll back abortion rights. They also worry about voting rights. Courts changed voting law around mail-in ballots to allow drop boxes and allow undated mail-in ballots to be counted, which is contrary to language in Act 77. Challenges are likely coming to the High Court in what figures to be a bitterly contested 2024 election.
I am firmly against a Supreme Court making those decisions. It is strictly for the legislature. And once we allow our judges to be activist judges, which is what they are advocating for, then we lose all structure. We end up in chaos.
You should always err on the side of counting votes, because that's the bedrock principle of American democracy, right? One person, one vote. You want to make sure you count votes. You don't disqualify votes based upon a clear technicality.
Philadelphia Democrat Dan McCaffrey is on the Superior Court. He and Carluccio both agree Act 77 was written poorly by the legislature, which is why it ended up in the courts. But he says abortion is on the ballot this year, because while Carluccio says she'll uphold the law, what happens if a future legislature and governor ban it?
Well, the law of the land is the Constitution, not what the legislature necessarily says. And I've said before, and I'll say it again, I think privacy rights are protected under the Constitution, period, full stop.
McCaffrey insists his experience on a statewide appellate court makes him the better candidate. Both are rated highly qualified, and both are highly offended.
But I had no idea it would be so personal, and it would really be attacking my integrity, and that lies could run rampant.
It's a complete, utter, 100% falsehood. It's just a flat-out lie being told about me.
An ad by Pennsylvanians for Judicial Fairness says this of Carluccio.
Deceitful and dishonest.
Deceitful and dishonest, Carluccio says, is the ad that says she scrubbed her website of pro-life views and claims she would move to ban abortion. False, she insists.
I've never had any pro-life language out there because I was very adamant that I would apply the law. And the law in Pennsylvania is really clear, and I'm happy to apply that law because it's my job.
In its attack on McCaffrey, the Commonwealth Leaders Fund added a third D word.
Dishonest, deceitful, disgusting.
This ad links Dan McCaffrey to his brother Seamus, who resigned from the Supreme Court 9 years ago for sending pornographic emails. Dan was on the chain.
I love my brother dearly. He made a mistake. Did I feel bad for Seamus? Absolutely. Did I have anything to do with this judicial email scandal? Absolutely not.
One of the ads has a warning about disturbing viewers. Perhaps it is the voters who should be disturbed.
One of us is going to end up on that Supreme Court, and we are both going to be bloodied.
These independent third-party groups that are coming in with these negative comments are very dangerous to democracy, and they really do undermine the integrity of the courts, in my opinion.
In the Supreme Court, currently 4 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 3 men, 3 women. What do we make of this race, a judicial race that's been in the gutter?
This is interesting because I don't think we typically see this much money or attention in the Supreme Court races. But these seats are so important, and typically voters are going in with very little information or exposure to these candidates. So while it has gotten nasty, I think we can celebrate a little bit that people are engaged and informed in this process. And I also think that the comments that Carluccio has made to you and to others are very reminiscent of Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearings and Brett Kavanaugh's, that they're going to follow the law, that certain cases are settled law, and then as soon as they're seated, they overturn Roe v. Wade. And I think we would see something very similar from Carluccio.
By the way, she's Brittany Crampsey, and he's Christopher Nicholas. I didn't even, we jumped right in.
Here's a couple things. If the Republican wins, the Democrats control the Supreme Court. If the Democrat wins, the Democrats control the Supreme Court. So there's one conclusion, regardless of who wins this, the Democratic Party still controls the Supreme Court. So people who say all these things are going to be overturned, they're really just talking out of school. Secondly, the political environment in Pennsylvania is pretty even-steven, okay? Third, the last 2 Supreme Court seats up have been open Republican seats, which meant that Republican justices had retired. This is a Democratic open seat. The former Chief Justice, who, even if he hadn't passed away suddenly late last year, he would have had to resign because of the retirement rule. So the Democratic folks who do those independent ads, they believe this seat belongs to them, which I can understand. That's why it's more intense than it has been in the past.
What do we make? Mark Levy of the AP reporting that the cost of this all in at the moment is $22 million and still going, because that was as of the last reporting, which was about 10 days ago.
Oh, yeah.
What do we make of this? Is a record now. $25 billion.
It'll be closer to 25, 26. Apparently, Pennsylvania is the only Supreme Court race this year where the candidates run as members of a party. There are other Supreme Court races in other states, but they run, nonpartisan without a party next to their name. So I think that's one of the reasons you've seen so much outside money come in, because it's a chance to help an R win or help a D win.
Absolutely, and even though this doesn't change the composition of the court, this is a process. We have judicial races every 2 years, so if the Democrats lose one this year, sure, we don't lose the court, but in 2 years we could lose the court. This is what we saw on the U.S. Supreme Court. Anti-abortion advocates waited until they had the majority in the Supreme Court to start the case that overturned Roe v. Wade. They're going to do the exact same thing here in Pennsylvania.
We got to take a quick...
The next Supreme Court race isn't until the 2030s.
We're going to come back and talk about a Commonwealth Court ruling that was pretty big this week. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, we've spent a lot of time on court races ahead of Tuesday's election, and a ruling by Commonwealth Court this week showed us why that's so important. Former Governor Wolf in 2019 unilaterally put Pennsylvania in RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which puts a tax on polluters. Industry groups sued, saying Wolf didn't have the power to do that, and this week, the courts agreed. This 10-page Commonwealth Court ruling a red light to the Greenhouse Gas Initiative. The opinion saying that in order to pass constitutional muster, RGGI may only be achieved through legislation enacted by the General Assembly, adding that it's an invalid tax and therefore void.
I think was a validation of the rule of law and our position that we've had all along. It is essentially a tax, and you can't levy a tax through an executive order.
Critics fear RGGI's taxes would drive consumer electric bills up and all-important energy-producing companies out.
We need to be a good place to do business, and this would have made us a bad place with high energy costs.
Today's ruling is not the final word on this matter, and we are confident that Pennsylvania can be and will be a leader in the clean energy economy.
The tax ruled unconstitutional, but environmental groups argue citizens also have a constitutional right to clean air and clean water, and they argue clean energy is big business.
For everyone worried about jobs and the economy, RGGI is projected to create 30,000 jobs, good-paying jobs. RGGI will deliver less pollution, more jobs, and a stronger economy for Pennsylvania.
So dealing with climate change falls back to the legislature, which has struggled to find consensus on the issue. House Majority Leader Matt Bradford said the environmental clock is ticking, and that ruling cannot be an excuse for further inaction. Our children and their children will be the judge of whether we heed this call. Governor Shapiro's office said he's reviewing the decision and in a statement tried to bridge the divide, saying he remains focused on addressing climate change, reducing emissions, and protecting public health, while creating jobs and protecting consumers. Well, more with Christopher and Brittany, and you just said what I was thinking. Governor Shapiro, on this issue, has tried to be all things to all people. Looks like he's doing that again. He's got 30 days to appeal that to the Supreme Court. Should he? Will he?
I don't know if I can answer either of those questions for him here, but I think the needle that he's threading here is that this was a process decision. This was about whether Tom Wolf had the authority to enter RGGI without the legislature, not whether the legislature should have done this or the governor's office should do this. I think we can all agree that we should do something. The climate crisis is coming and we need to act. So this is more about the technicalities of entering RGGI rather than whether we need to do a program like this.
Boy, Tom Wolf looks worse and worse in the rearview mirror, Dennis. Poor Governor Shapiro has to clean up all of his messes. So, this is an issue that I don't think Shapiro can figure out what he wants. He put a commission together on it. They made a report and he went and put it in the circular file. So now the court has forced his hand. Your question, will he appeal it to the Supreme Court? I think being the adroit Politico he is, he will wait and see the results from Tuesday's election about whether the court is 4-3 Democrat if Carluccio wins or 5-2 Democrat if McCaffrey wins.
If 5-2, he's more likely to do it?
Well, you have a lot more wiggle room at 5-2 than you do at 4-3. I haven't taken a math class since the Carter administration, but I think that all still holds.
All right.
We'll also have another opportunity into next year with the hydrogen hubs coming to
Yep.
Pennsylvania. There'll be enabling legislation for that, and we'll have an opportunity to put in some clean energy policy there as well. So whether he appeals or not, we're going to have another bite at this clean energy apple.
Very good. Don't go anywhere. More This Week in Pennsylvania right after the break. And welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. More with our analysts Christopher and Brittany. And the election's Tuesday. You're keeping your eye on the western part of the state.
Absolutely. Allegheny County this year, Pittsburgh region has the opportunity to have 2 competitive general elections. There's so many Democrats there, it usually doesn't happen. The county executive race between former state rep Sarah Innamorato and former banking executive Joe Rockey is essentially tied in the polls that I've seen. About 60% of the voters there are Democrats, so that's saying something that Joe Rockey
Well, she's a
has
proud
tied.
progressive. Do you think there might be a tamping down of wanting somebody that's so aggressively progressive?
I think so. I think that for sure. There's also a big DA's race there that matches the two Democrats who ran in the primary. The incumbent, Steve Zappala, who lost, won the Republican nomination on a write-in, so they're clashing. So it's a big kind of clash of generations and ideology, and some people there want Allegheny County to more mirror Philadelphia, and some people don't. So that's why we
it's
have
almost
elections.
a bellwether?
Yeah, and this is very similar to the primary debate in the Allegheny County executive race. Sarah ran against a sort of old school moderate Democrat, and she did very,
Four of
very
them.
well.
Yeah,
She had one main contender, and she did very well. She's got a progressive vision of the future of Allegheny County. And Allegheny County used to be a big steelworker, trades, labor community, and now it's meds, eds, and tech. It's a very different city than it was, and I think Sarah's got the vision for the future, whereas Rocky is sort of a little bit older.
You think it's
school there.
overstated how close that race is going to be?
I think it is. I think
Okay.
ultimately she's going to have a big
What are
win
you
there.
looking at on election day?
I think this year we're going to see a unique turnout for school board races. I mean, you see slates from the Moms for Liberty people, Democratic slates, driving turnout. There's fundraising in these races unmatched, in previous years. And I think we're going to see the bottom of the ballot driving turnout up instead of typically where we see these statewide races driving turnout and kind of trickles down from there. It's going to be the absolute opposite.
So it'll be very erratic because my district where I live doesn't really have a school board race. Obviously yours does, and so it's kind of just hit or miss. But a lot of times those hot local races drive turnout because they can get closer to the people because they're knocking on your door.
Last election before the big 2024 election next year, are we going to be able to glean anything from this that looks ahead?
I don't think so.
No.
Turnout is always interesting, but that is possibly the most base election analysis you can get.
It all comes down to turnout,
It
right?
does.
Well, you
It
two have
does.
given us great analysis today, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for watching.
Please
If
get out
you've-
and vote on Tuesday if you
Get
haven't
out and
voted by
vote
mail
Tuesday,
already.
November
Thank you.
7th. Have a great week.